Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. We're going to listen tonight to Lucie Chaumeton, who is a BBKA trustee, and she's quite heavily involved in the Asian hornet work we do. So tonight she's going to talk about the yellow-legged Asian hornet action plan for 2026. We'll take questions at the end. So if you put them in the chat, we'll sift through and see what's not been answered towards the end. So over to you, Lucie.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, Diane, and thank you for everyone who's making the time today. This here is an Asian hornet, and look at it fly. I just think they are amazing, amazing apex predators of the insect world. As you may guess from my Breton top and my unspellable surname, I am actually a dual citizen. I was born in France, though I've actually lived here longer than I have there by now. And so my interest in the Asian hornet was obviously very peaked when in 2023, a late nest of Asian hornets was destroyed less than 5 kilometers from where I live in Hackney. So as of that point, and given my sort of language skills and my ability to have followed what happened with the Asian hornet on the continent, I thought that inaction was very much not an option. So hopefully you're all familiar by now with the identifying features of the yellow-legged Asian hornet. And the main ones are obviously those yellow leg tips, those yellow socks. But it's also a very noticeably dark hornet. We don't really have wasps or hornets in this country that are this dark in color with this black thorax and most of the abdomen too, with this distinctive orange band on the abdomen and an orange face. So if you haven't seen an Asian hornet before, what I want to say to you is you will be able to identify them. They are very distinctive for us who are used to looking at insects. So the problem with Asian hornets is much bigger than just for beekeepers. First of all, it's a problem for the ecosystem and for pollinators in particular. Because when you dissect the stomach contents of an Asian hornet's nest, you'll find all sorts of pollinators, not just bees. Most of the pollinator species in the UK will be represented. And as you may know already, a nest of Asian hornets over the course of a year will consume 11 kilos of our native pollinators, which is the weight apparently of a standard car tire, but for us beekeepers, it's the weight of a full super, isn't it? So that is a lot of insects. So that's the first impact that the Asian hornet has, on a country when it arrives. It's the pollinators, but it's also obviously the crops. So on the continent, the grape crops get absolutely decimated, and it's very hard to sell fruit that's been, that's been damaged to this extent. But of course, if it's a problem for the crop, it's also a problem for the people working the crop, because it puts them in danger when they're handling the ripe fruit if there's Asian hornets flying about and potentially stinging them. So it's a problem for pollinators, for crops, for humans, and finally, I would say for honeybees as well. Because as you know, the Asian hornet loves to come and eat our bees towards the end of the season. And there are those places in France, in coastal areas with very high densities of Asian hornet nests where keeping bees becomes nigh on impossible, even for very experienced beekeepers. So the solution is definitely going to have to be bigger than beekeepers only. It's the French and the Belgian experience is definitely that beekeepers on their own can't keep it in the box. because Asian hornets don't care about, whether they're in this association or that associations, or whether there's beehives somewhere or not. They'll love, an urban environment where there's, lots of food sources. They're not picky. And so really, it's important that more than just beekeepers are involved in fighting the Asian hornet. So here in the UK, we already have some voluntary organizations that cut across from beekeeping to the wider community. One of them is called Asian Hornet Alert, was set up in Kent. One of them is the Isle of Wight Asian Hornet team. These initiatives where beekeepers try and work with the community, have worked really well. But really all of that, and the sort of key difference with how the UK is approaching the Asian hornet threat, is that there is a nationwide government action. And the National Bee Unit, as part of DEFRA, basically is tasked with an eradication mandate of the Asian hornet. And this is making a massive difference, a massive, massive difference to the progression of the Asian hornet in this country. So we really are in a unique position in the UK in how we fight back. And so it's really important that ourselves and our community support this unique effort. So this talk today is going to be very much about how you and everyone in the community can get involved to, to fight back. This is about what you can do. So we'll start by going over the UK picture as it is now. We've had some, good reports on the history up to 2025. So it's best to start there to decide what to do in 2026. And then again, we're going to be focusing on what is to be done. This is the cover of, Vladimir Lenin's seminal book that, whose consequences we're still living with, arguably, in today's world, right? The rise of communism and the USSR. Well, I've kind of updated it for our fight, and I've given Lenin an electric SWAT racket. And I want all of you to come out of tonight feeling empowered to join this fight, to grab your metaphorical SWAT racket. So there's really 4 strands that we're going to, that help structure a response to a pandemic like COVID or like the Asian hornet. And the first leg is to raise awareness, and the second one is to monitor. Then there's track and tracing. Right now, thanks to this government effort, that is done at the national level by the National Bee Unit. So it is outside the remit of beekeepers or of the general public. And then if and when Asian hornet nest densities increase, we might need to be prepared to defend our hive. So that's going to be more like a treatment rather than a prevention, if you like. Both of these topics, track and tracing and hive defenses, they're obviously very much live on the continent. And we're very lucky that we'll have Dominic Zoot from the continent, who will give 2 talks at the Spring Convention on these 2 topics. So I won't cover them in detail tonight. I'll focus on how you can help raise awareness and how you can monitor. And hopefully you'll come out of this ready to support the work of your Asian Hornet Action Team and the work of the NBU. So let's have a look at the UK's eradication policy. If you look at, this is a graph of the number of Asian hornet nests destroyed in the UK starting in 2016. And you can see that to start with, we had, 7 years of very, very low numbers. These were all genetically analyzed. They were all incursions from the continent, largely to coastal areas. And then in 2023, we experienced what's called a surge year, where there's a surge in the number of new nests. And that was also experienced in the continent. And so we jumped from single digits to just over 60 nests. This was the year where, a nest was found in Hackney, very near me. and where Asian hornet action teams were set up by the NBU to start involving beekeepers and the community a little bit more. And then things were definitely a bit better in 2024, and then another big jump in 2025. So you might think those figures don't look great for an eradication policy, but I beg to differ. Galicia, which is one part of Spain, had 2 nests destroyed in 2012. 7 years later, they had 25,000. Okay, so if you look at where UK nests were 7 years ago, we had 3 nests, not 2. So by my calculations, we'd be on 37,000 nests by now, not on 160. So I class that as a huge success. And again, back on the point about Spain and Galicia, these nests are causing a real health hazard over there, particularly with forestry workers, because the nests like to be in tall trees. So, I think we can conclude that, the NBU have not labored in vain for the last 7 years. Another way to look at it is to compare the maps in 2023 versus 2025. And these are maps of nests that have been destroyed. So again, this is the furthest inland nest we had in Hackney in 2023. Again, if you look at this, yes, there were in 2025 some incursions much further inland, but they were quite isolated and they were not at all at high densities. There is now some evidence that one of the nests from the north was genetically related to one from the south. So it's possible this traveled overland or it traveled by sea, but be that as it may, here is a circle that I've centered. I've not centered it on the furthest nest inland of 2023. I've centered it about here, yeah. And the reason why I've drawn a circle that's about 80 kilometers wide around that is the natural rate of progression of Asian hornets as it's been experienced on the continent, about 60 to 80 kilometers a year. So the natural progression of the hornet from 23 to 24 would have been within this circle, and within 2025 should have been within this circle. So you can see that clearly there is, a protective, element really of this eradication policy. It's maybe not managing in catching every nest and getting us right back to zero, but it's certainly slowed the progression a lot. So to my mind, that's something that's very well worth supporting. So how do we structure a response? If you go back to those horrible COVID years that we all lived through, there were, 4 aspects to the governance response: raising awareness, teaching us to wash our hands, rolling out testing so that then, the cases could be traced through the country, and then as a last resort, treatment needed to be thought of. So, and again, cast your mind back to the times where there weren't enough test kits. And that was a huge problem because you didn't know what you didn't know. You didn't know where COVID was, but you weren't tackling it. And so we have the same issue with, responding to the Asian hornet, that without active monitoring, without active testing for the presence of Asian hornet, we won't know whether we need to track and trace whether there are nests to destroy. So we need to raise awareness, we need to actively monitor, and then the government will do the track and tracing, but they can only do that if sightings are made and if these sightings are reported through the Asian Hornet Watch app. So a little note on the Asian Hornet Watch app. It's great for helping identify the Asian hornet. So even if you just get people to download it so they, again, can remind themselves what an Asian hornet looks like, that's great. But when you file a sighting, you are expected to upload a photo, and only sightings accompanied by a photo will be followed up by the NBU. And the other thing is to make sure, especially if you're doing this in an area with poor signal because you're out and about in the countryside, make sure your photo upload has completed. And you will know it has completed if you receive a confirmation email. So if you have gone on Asian Hornet Watch, uploaded a sighting, you haven't got a confirmation email, log that sighting again because it hasn't gone through. Make sure you receive that confirmation email. And then whilst we're talking about sort of good housekeeping and how to deal with, sightings, well, if you actually catch an Asian hornet, bear in mind you are not allowed to release it because obviously, you might think as catching and releasing as in the same place, but what the government really wants to avoid is Asian hornets traveling across the country. So there's a countrywide ban. You do not trap the insect and then release it. If you've trapped it, you need to keep it trapped. You may kill it, but you keep it, and then you hand it over to the NBU. You do not keep it for yourself, and you do not release it in nature. You hand it over to the NBU. They are the people who handle the samples of Asian hornets that get found wherever they're found in the country. So we're not to keep any Asian hornets, and we're not to release them either. We're to keep them for the NBU to analyze. And if you don't want to keep them alive, freezing them is a very good way to, to give them a gentle end. Okay, so raising awareness. There are lots of resources for you on the Members Hub, which is the part of the BBK's website that's behind your login, behind your membership number. So it's restricted to BBKA members. And there's you'll see an area there dedicated to Asian hornets. There's lots of resources there. And we are structuring them around the 4 themes of raising awareness, monitoring and trapping, track and tracing, and hive defenses. So hopefully you'll find what you're looking for. Ask your Asian Hornet team coordinator. They should have a lot of materials that they can share with you. And we'll discuss some of those. And then finally, we have a dedicated person in the office called Teresa Middlebrook. Her email is outreach@bbka.org.uk. So she handles all aspects of outreach between BBK and its members, between BBK and external organizations. Again, if you haven't been able to find the resource you're looking for, she is the person to help you with this, and she's lovely and very capable. So some simple ideas of things you can do to raise awareness. Handing out posters. This is what I meant when I said your AHAT should have some resources. These posters are free, yeah, from by emailing the non-native species secretariat. They will send you as many free posters as you like. You can ask for plain ones, or you can ask for laminated ones that are great for hanging outdoors. And so this is a great win, because for every person you hand a poster to, if they put up that poster, they will reach a lot more people in their community. So make sure you get your hands on some of these free posters and that you distribute them, because obviously every time you have contact with someone as part of your beekeeping, as part of selling your honey, this is an opportunity to raise awareness. So, here's your jar of honey and here's a free poster. Or here's your jar of honey and here is your free ID card. So I've pictured the 2 that I know of. The ones on the right here are produced again by the Non-Native Species Secretariat, available for free. And these, to my mind, are much prettier. They were actually designed and printed by the BBKA, so maybe you'll be able to grab a few if you come to the spring convention. And you'll notice that those have got a QR code at the back, which people can use to find Asian Hornet Watch and to download it to their phone. So handing these out, again, I get through loads of them with every honey stall that I run. They're very popular and people can just keep them. The other thing that's great if you're running a honey stall is a resin block with an Asian hornet in it. This is one from a popular bee equipment manufacturer, which I will not name. Not only are they a great educational tool, but they're a great way to keep children from messing around with your display of honey jars. every time they will go for the critters in the resin, and they will then show their parents and be like, look, mom, look, dad, and then you'll be handing out those business cards that I was talking about before. So those cost about £4, £5, £6, depending on where you look. They are a worthwhile investment. You only need the one to be showing people. There's a user, a Facebook user called Ernie's Resins, who produces some very nice blocks of 4 insects in resin. And there's a European hornet, an Asian one, and then a wasp and a bee. So that's someone you can ask as well. And then finally, if you do travel abroad and have, a few Asian or hornets in alcohol that you've brought back, you could make them yourself using 2-part resin, but do be careful working with resin. The fumes are quite noxious. You need to use a respirator, and you also need to cure it at the right temperature. So it's not something to just kind of, attempt on a whim. But it is a very, very useful prop. And finally, have a stall bag. So mine proudly says that I love N2 because that's where I live. In it, I put all my posters, I put my business cards, and I put my resins. And it's there and it's ready for me to just grab and put in the boot of the car when I go and do a stall. And I don't even have to think whether I've got everything or not. And, again, apart from the 2 resins there, everything else is free. So there's really no reason not to have an Asian hornet stall bag ready. The other tip for raising awareness is to use tech. And one thing that, to my mind, if you have a beekeeping email account, it should have an auto signature that raises awareness. So this is mine for my, again, my beekeeping email address. I've grabbed this little, ID panel from, the APHA. And I've put see it, snap it, app it. If you see a yellow-legged hornet, please take a photo reporting. And there's the links for how to get to Asian Hornet Watch. So it is a bit of an annoyance. You have to do it for each of the devices that you use email on. But once it's set up and it will reach so many people. So do try and do that. And of course, the other thing is to use social media, whatever platform you use. BBK is on Facebook, on Instagram, I think on X, and I think even on LinkedIn. So there are posts out there that you should try and share because, you might not think of yourself as a mega influencer, but, if you have even a couple of followers, you might as well let them know about this issue. And a man called Ian Campbell runs social media for the BBKA. That is his photo, that is his email address there. So look out for materials from the BBK accounts, but also if you yourself generate some materials, send them to him so that he can also help propagate them. So making a noise on social media. Finally, there's some nationwide campaigns that we're aiming to plug into. And the first one is the Non-Native Species Secretariat Invasive Species Week, which is at the end of June. So there's a website here. If you Google it, there's the NNSS's website for Invasive Species Week. When you click on that, you'll come to this page. And notice that on Tuesday, the 23rd of June, the theme is volunteering and recording. So that is the day that is right up our street with Asian Hornet. We want as many people as possible to volunteer, to look out for Asian Hornet and to record the fact that they've looked and to record what they found. So a working group from the BBKA was one of our excellent AHAD coordinators called Richard Senior. We're putting together a pack for schools to set up little monitoring projects as part of that Invasive Species Week. And we'll add that project and those resources to the public-facing part of the website, the school resources. The other nationwide campaign that is organized by the BBKA itself mostly is Asian Hornet Week, although again we coordinate with APHA and the Non-Native Species Secretariat on that. So you can see Luke Wyatt here, who was previously our chair of the Asian Hornet Committee, and he's by the London Eye wearing the Asian Hornet costume, which you can borrow by contacting Teresa. I've seen it in use at various beekeeping events. It's always really, really popular. Kids come and ask questions. They hug it sometimes, which is really cute. So this week, Asian Hornet Week will be the week commencing the 7th of September. It's a little bit late in the year, but it ensures that parliamentarians and school kids, etc., that everyone is back at work and can be reached when we're trying to raise awareness. And between now and then, get yourself a pair of yellow socks or a pair of yellow boots so you can take part in Yellow Socks Day or Yellow Socks Week. This is Warwick Newson, who chairs our Asian Hornet Committee, and there he is wearing his yellow socks for Yellow Socks Day. You know, yellow socks are very uncommon. They're a great way, you know, if you're wearing them, again, to get people to ask questions and for you to make them aware. So that's it really in terms of my tips for raising awareness. In terms of active monitoring, again, bear in mind that if we're not actively testing, we don't know the scale of the problem. You all remember how the lack of testing kit was such a problem, you know, in the early days of COVID. Well, you know, here there's no technology involved. You know, monitoring for Asian hornets is as simple as looking out. So we really want to make sure that we do this active monitoring. And so I'll talk a little bit about the when, the where, and the how to do that. So in terms of the when, you sadly have to kind of go back to the life cycle of the Asian hornet, because obviously we are not trying to trap workers. There's no point in killing 1, 2, or even 10 or 20 Asian hornet workers. There's still plenty more of them in the nest, and those are going to carry on. And what we want to avoid is the nest reproducing. So the nest will produce sexual adults in the late autumn, sort of mid-September onwards, September, October onwards. Sexual adults are produced, and then these will mate, and then the fertile queens will go into hibernation. And they will come out of hibernation, well, about now, at the same time as European hornets come out of hibernation. And you might have seen queen bumblebees. So those queens are the hornets that potentially we want to trap, because we want to prevent those from creating new nests. All the rest of the year, a hornet alive is worth 10 of them dead, because you can't track a dead hornet back to its nest. You can track a live hornet back to its nest, and then you can destroy the nest. So it's very important that we don't that we only deploy trapping where it's absolutely necessary. So we're only ever trapping when queens, as potential foundresses of new nests, are out and about. That's the only time when trapping is appropriate. So pretty basic, but it's important to understand the difference between monitoring and trapping. You can monitor for worker hornets without a trap. So this here is a picture of what we call a wick station. Yeah. So it's a little pot that you'll fill with bait. Preferably you make this pot out of a shatterproof material, so there's no kind of risk to people if they knock it over. You fill it with bait, and then this wick here, basically by capillarity, will feed the bait to the flying insect. So essentially what you will have created is a perpetual flower that's always in bloom. So the use of these wick stations is appropriate everywhere. It'll be especially effective in late summer, when Asian hornet nests that are at their busiest, when there's most hornets around. So that is safe. That is going to attract Asian hornet workers. And once they have habituated to where you've put your wick station, they will return to it. So you don't need to be trapping them at that location. They're very happy to have found a perpetual food source, so they will return to it. And this pattern of returning to it is how the NBU will track them back to their nest. So it's a really, really good way to look for workers in the late summer, and it can be done everywhere. Trapping is done by putting basically one of these wick stations inside a trap that insects find it easy to fly into, but they find it difficult to fly back out of. So although we try and calibrate these traps so that the size of the opening will let Asian hornets in, but not too many other species, bear in mind that although generally Asian hornets are smaller than European hornets, there is a lot of overlap. There's a lot of individual Asian hornets that are bigger than the smaller European hornets. So that means you can never have a trap that is 100% selective and that will only trap Asian hornets. It's just not possible, which means that you have to make your trap non-kill, because other insects will fly in, other insects will be trapped inside. You need to make sure these insects don't die, and they would die by drowning. They would die by drowning in rainwater, in condensation, or in bait that is left exposed. This is why we ask that if you are using traps, that they have a roof, that they have a dry wick station inside, and that you check them for condensation, and that you release on a daily basis anything that is not an Asian hornet from there. So bear in mind, this trapping is only appropriate where you are actively looking for queens. So that means around nests that are known to have issued fertile queens, and you do that when those queens emerge, i.e. in the spring or in the autumn. Trapping even at its safest, it can pose a risk to native insects. Let's say you put this trap out with the best of intentions, and then you end up in a hospital and you're not able to look after it. You could have insects trapped in there for a long time. Don't take that risk. Only use trapping where it's necessary, because everywhere else, actually monitoring with bait stations is extremely effective. And if there are Asian hornets in the area and you leave a wick station there, they will find it and they will return to it, and it'll be perfectly safe for all species of pollinators. So in terms of where we might want to do some trapping this year, the NBU are no longer doing that themselves because it would involve too many traps and too many visits for them. But they have very helpfully given us this map, which shows where nests were destroyed. So in green, anything they've destroyed before the 6th of September, not likely to have issued fertile queens. In orange or amber, the ones that were destroyed between the 6th and the 29th of September. And then in red, there's 32 nests that were destroyed from the 30th of September onwards. These are quite likely to have issued queens. They would very likely have done some trapping after they destroyed the nest to try and catch them in late autumn. But obviously, you might want to check around those nests this year. So that's it. And then in terms of trapping, again, to reiterate the message, trapping should only be done. So see, this is the same trap here. This is a Veto Farmer trap on the left. It's not safe unless you put a wick station at the bottom. If you're just putting liquid bait in there, insects will drown. That is not safe. We do not advise you to use this method. If you put a wick station inside it, then you're safe. This Group Asian Hornet Alert in Kent that I mentioned at the beginning, they have commissioned these very cheap plastic selective traps, as selective as they can be. Again, you need to use them with a roof and with a wick station at the bottom, and they only cost between £2 and £3 each. And then Guard Apis is kind of the Rolls Royce, it's more in the, I think it's over £20 these days. But again, very selective, and there's no open liquid in it. So these are some of the many, many traps that you can buy out there. Just remember that a safe trap should not have any open liquid in it. and it needs to be checked daily anyway. In terms of monitoring station, I wanted to make you aware, you will see the picture on the right, these open trays. You will see those especially in materials published by the NBU, because that is what they use in track and trace scenarios. The advantage of using an open tray like this is that the scent of the bait diffuses very quickly and very widely. So when you're in a track and trace scenario and you're constantly moving the wick station closer to the nest, and the hornet has to find it again, even though it's moved, it's important to have a lot of bait exposed, okay? But these are only deployed for very, very short amounts of time. You know, the NBU personnel is watching them all the while, so there is no sort of bycatch to that. I would not be comfortable about you or members of the public deploying these kinds of trays, because invariably it's going to start raining, there's going to be water in there, insects will drown. It's much safer for you to use a wick station that is closed, that is shatterproof. And again, if you leave it in a given place for a couple of hours, insects will find it. And finally, remember that as with any activity that involves stinging insects, there are risks, not just as we've seen to our native pollinators, but also to the humans that are deploying the wick station, and maybe to the humans that are going around the wick station and might not know what it's for or why it's there. So we have published some guidelines that cover all three aspects of safety around trapping and monitoring: the safety of the monitor, the safety of our pollinators, and the safety of the greater public around these objects. So make sure that you read those. Again, we need to give some credit there to Michelle Elliott from Asian Hornet Alert, who compiled in particular this checklist here, which is very useful to read before you go and check on a monitoring station that's not just in your home. So do read them. We didn't write them for our own amusement. You know, it's important that you're safe when you're doing these activities. Bait. Now, bait can be quite expensive. You can see that 5 litre of the standard trapid bait is can set you back 75 quid. But you can build as well as buy, and it's not rocket science. Use something sweet. This can be sugar, it can be fruit syrup, it can be jam diluted in water, you know, some sugary liquid. Something fermented is important because it will repel bees. So beer, vinegar, white wine, baker's yeast, you know, all these means of fermenting sugars will, you know, should work in repelling, you know, bees while still attracting wasps and hornets. And you could, you know, add some protein to your bait, especially in late summer, but this will affect the shelf life of your product. Diffusing the scent is important. So a little bit of ethyl acetate can help kind of make the smell, you know, travel through the air a little bit faster. Whatever it is that you decide to put in your magic potion, label it clearly. Yeah, you will invariably leave it somewhere where people are not expecting to find it, and they will wonder what it is. And you, I mean, if you're only using the ingredients I've listed above, they might not kill themselves, but you don't want anyone to drink it or kids to play with it. So label it clearly, say that it's not for human consumption, and ideally put it in, again, in a shatterproof container so that you're not going to end up with shards of sticky glass. It's important for coordinations purposes that you record your monitoring activity. So there's at least 3 ways to do that. The first one is part of the ER2 system that manages our BBKA memberships. So it's a 1 kilometer grid square map where people can basically assign themselves. So these squares in yellow here, an Asian Hornet coordinator has said, okay, I'm going to look after this area. So they've colored them yellow. And then if they actually find, you know, a monitor to assign to the square, then they will assign it to this square to that monitor, and that square will turn this kind of blue-purple color. And this way you can see what your coverage of an area is. Another system is called Catch. So it's got a kind of more open map. You can overlay these grid squares. I don't know if you can see them, but they are there or not. You can search it. And, again, the idea is you can see, sightings and nests, and you can see where the monitors are. And so, for instance, this was an issue we had last year. There was this area here with quite a lot of sightings and nests around Rye, and maybe not quite enough monitors and coordinators on the case. So you can see why recording your activity in these maps is important, because it allows coordination. It allows, those people kind of leading the effort to see whether maybe the effort needs to be increased somewhere. So within Catch, sort of unlike ER2, users who are monitors can also kind of see where, where various objects are, where the traps are, but there is a strict definition of different roles, and your information, your personal data is quite safe within this because it can't be accessed by other regular users. And then finally, there's the OS map. There's nothing wrong with that. If that works for you, OS map and stickers. This is what we had in 2023 to start with. Take it to your meeting and ask people to record where they could where they could do this. But basically, unless you are yourself an Asian Hornet coordinator, in which case it's for you to choose how you're going to coordinate and which system you're going to use. Otherwise, as a monitor, follow what your AHAD coordinator has chosen at a system, and make sure that your coordinator is going to spend a lot of time organizing a monitoring campaign. Make sure that you do your bit by at least giving them the right data, giving them the right information in whichever system it is that they choose to use. To end the monitoring on a more positive note, tech could really help us here. And again, this is where being an island, being a little bit further later in the curve of the Asian Hornet invasion, mean that we're going to have tools that never existed in France or in Belgium when they were faced with the invasion. So this here is a screenshot from something called Vespa AI, which uses artificial intelligence to basically recognize the fact that this is an Asian Hornet, but this is not. The great thing about these monitoring stations is that they are no bycatch and they are always on. So you don't have to go and check them. They just wake up when something happens. So this is the Vespa AI technology. This is a picture of if you want, the whole station. So it's got a roof. This is where it's monitoring under this dome. And unfortunately, it requires car battery power. So it's a little bit heavy and bulky. And it was developed, I think, by the University of Exeter. So that's Vespa AI. There's a cheap and cheerful version called Buzzcopper that was developed by a very helpful engineer called Jonathan Semple, who isn't even a beekeeper at all. He just did that from the goodness of his heart. So he's going with self-assembly because he wants this to be a community project. So you'll see that there's a recycled bottle, there's 3D printed plastic components, and the electronics themselves are very small and very cheap. So again, these tools are for monitoring, but not for trapping. But what they open up is the possibility of monitoring areas where we don't have humans, areas like forests, national parks, etc., where there isn't a lot of human traffic, but the Asian Hornets, maybe like them all the more. So it's important that we, we try and support that technology. This is version 2. We're gonna need a bigger bottle, but within that bigger bottle, we can fit these two solar panels, and that means that the unit can self-power for for quite a long time. So then the only restriction is on the amount of bait you can put in there and how long that lasts. So that's all going on, and it gives me hope that, again, we have a better chance against the Asian hornet than did the continent. So again, remember, I really hope you can all help monitor this year. Anything shatterproof can be, any shatterproof plastic container can be turned into a bait station. Open trays are not necessary for your regular activity. And actively monitor wherever you are, because if there's one thing we learned from last year is that those things travel, whether they travel by land or by sea, they travel across the country, and all that we know is that we don't know where they're going to establish and start a new nest. So have a check during the summer while there's still plenty of time to destroy the nest before it issues fertile queens, and you'll have done your bit. Track and trace, as I said, is not our remit. It is very luckily the remit of the government, because though it can be a fun day out, it's also in practice a lot of work and a lot of hours. So we're very grateful that, the government takes care of that. If you want to find out more about how track and trace works, Dominique Zoot will give an excellent lecture on that at the Spring Convention, which will be recorded. So even if you're not coming to the Spring Convention, which you should, even if you're not, you will be able to catch up on that online and get it, educate yourself about how to do that. So again, we will, you should not trap and release a hornet, which means that you cannot take part in track and trace yet. But, there will be some lectures and some materials that will be filed onto the members hub. Okay. Again, here, Tech to the Rescue really helps us. The Robo is, a system for putting these little electronic tags on hornets so that they can then be tracked much faster to their nest. So Tom Bickerdike from the NBU told us recently that the 4 Robo units that they used last year helped find 50 of the nests, 50 of the 160. So you can see how it's made a very material difference, because he reckoned that for those, track and trace time was reduced to, by at least 25%. So right now, these little units cost about 90 or 100 euros each, but, alternatives are coming on the market as well. Again, tech will help. And then again, in terms of, to round up, in terms of hive defenses, well, first of all, this isn't really a problem on the mainland just yet. Jersey is obviously a whole different kettle of fish. But in mainland UK, I think only one apiary had some losses in 2023 when the scale of the incursion wasn't really expected. But as far as I know, there hasn't been a hive lost to Asian hornets since. We're still comparatively in very, very low nest densities, even, even in Kent, compared to the densities you experience in France and Belgium and the Netherlands. Our densities are very low. And bear in mind that even in high density areas, beekeepers on the continent have found ways to adapt. And what they use is a combination of trapping queens around their apiaries, so close to their apiaries, they try and prevent the establishment of nests. Using hive defenses, which are not just gadgets like putting a muzzle on your hive or putting an electric harp in your apiaries. They're also new beekeeping habits. Yeah, they're also doing things differently, and in particular, they are keeping strong colonies in quite dense apiaries, which goes a little bit against how we've been doing things. They're also inspecting later in the day. To try and avoid overlapping. The long and the short of this is that we're not going to have to invent anything here in the UK. There are plenty of beekeepers who have already documented, the beekeepers' experiences on the continent. I've put 3 of the books there, but, really, there's plenty for you online that you can educate yourself with. And again, there's going to be, Dominique Zoot is also going to give us a lecture at the Spring Convention, which will be recorded. So I hope this has given you an idea to go back to my early graphic of what is to be done about the Asian hornet. And it's to be done by all of us, every member of the BBKA, but every member of our communities around us as well. Make sure you do your bit to raise awareness so that people around you know what an Asian hornet is, why it matters, and how to report it. Make sure you monitor and help expand the coverage of our monitoring so that we are actively looking this year and not just finding out where Asian hornets are. Use BBK resources because those are available. There's awareness materials, there's the social media, there's those guidelines for monitoring safety. And finally, thank you for your time today. So I'm going to stop here and take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. That was really great. We have done a poll in the background, which Claire will launch now, just asking what people in the audience's role is. So can you all click on that? I will stop Lucy screen sharing.
Sure.
And then we will have a look at some of the questions. Sally's asked, what does the queen look like?
Okay, so the queen looks, to all intents and purposes, just like a bigger Asian hornet. And bear in mind that basically you pretty much need to do a dissection and or have some calipers and do some very precise measurements of the wing setup of the queen to ascertain whether she's a queen. Because I mean, you'll know this with bees as well. There's big bees, there's small bees, there's big queens, there's small queens. And it's the same with Asian hornets. Some queens are much bigger than others. Some workers are much bigger than others. It depends on what there's been to eat, you know, when they were larvae. So yeah, unfortunately, you won't be able to tell whether it's a queen or not. If you catch an Asian hornet in a trap, hand it over to the NBU. They'll tell you. They will know. So that's why we hand everything over to them.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm going to go to someone in the audience. Six Frog, you're showing up as.
Love that handle. Yes.
There you go.
Yes, I've recently purchased some of that stuff you've been showing and the traps. When do we deploy them? Sorry, I was a bit late joining.
Oh, so you've bought some traps, did you?
Yes, yeah.
So, and are you in an area where there was a late nest near where you would deploy those traps?
We're Beverly beekeepers. I think there's been the odd one couple of years back.
Okay, so what you want to do is you want to get in touch with your Asian Hornet team coordinator and ask them whether you are in an area where it's necessary to do some queen trapping this year or not. If it's not necessary, I would encourage you. So if it is necessary, they'll tell you everything you need to know. And yes, you could be deploying now. If, however, there wasn't a nest that's likely to have issued queens within sort of 5 kilometers of where you are, I would say hang on to this and do your monitoring in high summer, sort of mid-July, August onwards.
My colonies are above my on my flat roof. My colonies are on my flat roof, so I'm very close to them. We're also not that far from the docks, of course. So
well, that's great. So, okay. So docks is an interesting case in point because obviously you are near a likely point of entry for Asian hornets. And I did not mention this in the presentation. Monitoring really should go on all year round around likely points of entry. And I think past experience says that marinas, ports, sort of wholesale food markets. So the Hackney Nest where I was almost certainly from the New Spitalfield market, which has, you know, huge wholesale quantities of fruit and veg. Race courses as well. It seems they like to travel in horse boxes. So if you've got one of those points, then it is appropriate to have a trap that you monitor regularly and to do this through the year. Yeah.
Would you go nearer the docks? Because I've got an allotment near the docks.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. The nearer you can be to the point of entry, the better. Yeah.
But again, jump in there actually to say if you're putting traps up, you can record them on your bee base as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can
I've,
add them there.
Yeah.
today
again,
I found the first queen wasp today. It had accidentally fallen
Yeah.
into my pond. So
Yeah.
they're
So
definitely
queen wasps will likely come into your traps as well, and you'll have to release them. Yeah. So bear
yeah,
that in mind, because it is, as I said, you can't have 100% selective trap.
yeah.
You know, they've done this.
Well,
It's just not possible.
they won't be getting released if I catch them anyway, because
I,
they
you know,
destroy a lot of bees. Yeah,
your decision.
yeah.
You know, I'm only concerned with the Asian hornet. I wouldn't advocate the destruction of native species, but that's your choice, obviously. Yes.
Ah, thank you so
And
much.
I'll throw in, please don't destroy queen wasps at this time of the year. If you do, you will find yourself surrounded in the middle of summer by millions of aphids and things. Wasps have a really important part in the ecosystem, and I
Yeah.
personally will come and shout at you if I find out you're killing them.
There you go.
I
I
think
won't,
that's
but Diane will. So yeah.
really important not to do that. And one of the
There
other
are,
reasons is, other than
yeah.
the ecological damage, is it will give us a really bad name with every other person who loves wasps. And there's actually quite a lot of them who love other insects more than we
Yeah.
love our honeybees. So we have to be really, really careful.
Aye.
I can see Andy there. Before we go to Andy, I'm going to say Simon in the chat said we have a sticker we put on our honey jars. There are
Mhm.
some of the major suppliers who do those as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Angus says that Ernie's resins are out of stock until the summer.
Well, there you
That's
go.
disappointing. He needs some more insects, but obviously
Yes.
they have to be sourced responsibly for the not
Yeah.
Asian hornet ones.
Yeah.
So Andy,
Hi, Diane. Hi, Lucy. Lovely chat. Thank you
Hi,
so
Andy.
much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, just two things really quickly. Please find whoever your area coordinator is and work through them. They will be so helpful to you, and it'll help us build the big picture. That's the important thing. We're trying to avoid little rogue units all over the place, because that's exactly what happened in France.
Yeah.
And it's borders and bureaucracy that are the hornet's best friend. Yes, but bycatch is obviously to be avoided, even if we don't. One of the things I wanted to point out, that this is so much not a beekeeper issue, and this is what we're trying to stress. So avoiding, in some respects, avoiding traps even in anywhere around your apiary, just make it a separate issue from beekeeping. And as far as ports are concerned and openings, remember there's truck stops and distribution centres. A big one up in Preston. Last year there was a queen seeing disappeared. And we still don't know what's happened, although there's been 2 sightings last year. And the other big thing is, with the increasing numbers of Asian hornets in Holland right now, our main concern, especially given that the queens do particularly well in damp, warm bark over the winter, is a very large proportion of the products that turn up in our garden centres is from Holland. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's way over 50%. I can tell you that now.
thanks, Andy.
Educating people, which I absolutely, totally support, as many people as you can. Target some of your garden centres this year.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fantastic bonus.
I mean, having said that, I am a big fan of the UK's eradication policy, because, I've seen what the lack of an eradication policy has done in France and on the continent. With this being said, the one thing that I'm not a big fan of is the fact that it didn't come with a nationwide awareness campaign. And I think that having sort of indirectly put beekeepers in charge of raising awareness is very much a double-edged sword, because it makes it look like it's a beekeeper's problem. And this was why I stated clearly at the beginning of this talk, it is not a beekeeper's problem. It is a health and safety issue. It's a biodiversity issue. It's not a beekeeper's issue. And in how you raise awareness and convey this, try and make it clear that you're not doing this because of your bees or because of your honey. It is actually, much.
I've given a series of talks in my area recently, and at no stage mentioned that I'm a beekeeper.
Yeah. And again, if you look at the solutions, Jonathan Semple, who invented Buzzcopper, is not a beekeeper. You don't have to be a beekeeper to do any of this work. So, do recruit all your, friends, families, and frenemies into this,
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you. If everyone can have another bash at doing the poll, if you haven't already done that.
Well,
we've got 81% feedback at the moment, so if we can up that a bit, we'll close.
93% participation, I see. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think, one more thing I was going to mention is that I think there are some smaller branch associations who haven't been able to appoint an Asian Hornet team coordinator. That could be you. You don't need to be a master beekeeper. You don't need to be, I think Andy and I will vouch for the fact that it's quite a bit of work, especially the first year. Once you've got, your monitors established and a bit of a routine, it is quite a bit of work, but it's interesting work. And again, it's like, if you're coming to a point where, maybe physically beekeeping is a bit too demanding, it's something you can do to still be involved in the community. I've enjoyed that role as much as it's also been work. So if you think you could be an AHAD coordinator, well, put yourself up, for the role.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to ask? There's some comments in the chat that I'm not going to ask tonight.
Hello?
Hello, is that Kathy?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, Lucy, is there any research happening so that we can be rid of the yellow-legged Asian hornet? I mean,
there is lots of research happening, especially in the continent. I mean, there should be recordings of some recent webinars. One was by the European Beekeepers Association, which is like a syndicate of all the, and BBKA is actually a member as well. So yeah, research is always taking place. There's been research, for instance, in how to use maybe pheromones to attract them, various ways to combat them, etc. Yes, there is research going on all the while. And one thing that you can do is join, Ian Campbell, whose picture I showed, our social media manager. He has a WhatsApp, what's called a WhatsApp channel. So it's not a chat that you can sort of talk back to, but anytime that an interesting piece of research or news comes out, he publishes it on that WhatsApp channel. So you can subscribe to that. And maybe we should sort of add that, and then you'll be kept abreast of everything we know of anyway.
Yeah. So sort of, some kind of research so that the queens are not able to reproduce. Something like that could be useful, couldn't it?
Yeah. I think all these avenues are being researched, and this has started, it started in in 2004. There's actually quite a lot of it, because obviously there was this. I mean, this is where the language skills, this what's his name, Darouzet. There's a bunch of researchers, particularly in France and in Spain, and who have done a lot of research, but sort of deploying these as defense mechanisms is not necessarily easy. But yeah, one of the issues with the Asian hornet is that it's so damn adaptable.
Yeah,
it will nest almost anywhere, and where there's a low density. So at first, when it arrives somewhere and there's not that many Asian hornet nests, it will nest really high up, 20 to 30 meters up. So this is why very often the early incursions are missed, because these nests are not anywhere that's immediately bothering the general public. And by the time the nests are sort of coming down, the density is much higher already. So this is why active monitoring is important. We've got to catch, see them whilst they're flying, because we probably won't see the nests
Yeah.
to start with until it's too late and there's too many of them.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mm.
Did we have any other questions or comments?
There's just some quite long comments that I'll make sure we capture everything.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too distracted tonight.
Yeah, lots of good comments from Andy. Thank you. Yes. Take your point about AI versus shape pattern recognition anyway. Yes. I did some of the kind of model training on the bus copper, because obviously traveling to France, I had access to lots of images of Asian hornet that we could use to train the model. But the point is to have a recognition model. Yes.
Yeah, Andy's put a really good comment in, actually. When you're talking to people out and about, selling honey, whatever, don't let them walk away from you without putting that app in their phone. If you can persuade them to put that app in, we stand more of a chance of involving people.
Yeah.
So we've got Six Frog again. If you unmute.
Mm-hmm.
Hiya. So are there any numbers on how many colonies have been lost in France and Spain per annum?
I haven't got those numbers at my fingertips, but I can tell you that, the conical traps that, like the guard apis, there's a guy called Denis Jaff who invented kind of that concept. And he's obviously a very experienced beekeeper. He came up with that concept of these big traps that you put under your hive, basically, and kind of da-da-da-da-da. He won an innovation prize in France over that. He is a professional beekeeper, and there are parts of where he is where he says he can't keep bees, where the density, where you reach the coast, basically the western coast, and the density of nests is that high, there is nothing you can do.
Wow.
But at lower densities, so it is very hard to quantify, because actually you might have had winter losses this winter, right? Well, we're all scratching our heads wondering exactly, was it Varroa, was it CBPV, was it poor feeding, was it late mating, etc., etc. One of the things that you're going to throw into the mix is Asian hornets. And, people might like to blame Asian hornet rather than their lack of winter treatment. It's very hard to tell, but definitely it has an impact, sadly, once the nest densities increase. Yeah.
Thanks. Over to Brian now.
Yeah, one thing we should be doing with the lack of foliage on the trees is when we go out walking, look up in the trees, because when the foliage comes on, obviously the nests will be hidden. So if there's any nests about now, it's a good time to look up in the trees when you're walking.
Yeah. Bear in mind that right now they're probably primary nests being built. So the primary nests tend to be about the size of an orange or a tennis ball, and they tend to build those primary nests in sheds and in slightly more sheltered places. So this time of year is also really, really good time to check sheds and awnings and sort of garages, etc., and to look for these small primary nests about the size of an orange. Yeah.
But there will be nests that were built last year.
Yeah, the nests from last year will
that
still
you
be
could
visible
spot.
and high up in the trees. Yes, that's a good point, Brian. Thank you.
Right. I think that's it for this evening. So
Andy's got
thank
his
you.
hand up again.
Oh, go on, Andy. Just as it's you. Unmute.
Yeah, you're still
Oh,
muted.
You've got to unmute.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. How basic is that? Sorry. I pressed the lower hand. Yeah, sorry. If you could share with me, Diane, I've got a slide here from the British Irish Fling recently, which answers one of the earlier questions about beekeeper losses and statistics.
Go on, if you should be able to share now.
And Dominic, meanwhile, very kindly said 30% colony losses by Asian hornet in France and Spain.
How does that look?
Dominic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yes, that's the slide. Yes, I didn't put that in, but the slide with the stomach contents, right?
Yeah, this is a slide here about colony losses. This relates only to beekeeping losses, not the rest of the industry, where there's talk of anything up to 30% losses of fruit in northern Spain, southern France, due to lack of pollinators. And then there's the contents thing here, what they're eating.
Yeah. And that if you find the recordings of the EBA presentations, that was covered there as well.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. Yeah, I think that's one of the other points is that we in Britain were not so well designed to cope with the sort of influx that they would have had on some of these countries in the continent. One of the greatest, if you like, habitats for invertebrates, and I'm talking about all of them, not just insects now, is the fact that the natural hay meadows, the open lands and stuff. In Britain, we lost 97% of that over the last 50 years. So our insect population is already on the ropes. You throw Asian hornet in an infestation style in here, we are in a lot of trouble, eco-wise. And that's the message we've really got to get over to anyone who's even vaguely interested in having anything other than, the green deserts that we have at the moment. Thank you. Sorry, I've said my bit.
Thanks, Andy. Right, I'm going to hit stop record.